The 2012 NFL Draft was supposed to be a class for the ages. Suck for luck was the mantra of the season, and teams were actively tanking games just to secure that top pick because everyone was convinced this class was a sure thing. You had two elite quarterbacks at the top, a running back who looked like he couldn't miss, and four first-round receivers, along with a defensive group packed with blue-chip talent. On paper, this was supposed to be a draft that defined a generation of football, but the reality turned out to be much darker. A few hits saved this draft class from being a total disaster, but those success stories are few and far between. We have to start with the very top pick, Andrew Luck out of Stanford. He went number 1 overall to Indianapolis as the most hyped quarterback prospect since Peyton Manning. And that wasn't just draft season chatter from the media. The Colts went 2-14 in 2011 specifically to land this pick, openly running the Suck for Luck campaign and dropping games down the stretch to ensure they got their guy. Luck delivered on that hype immediately by throwing for 4,300 yards and 23 touchdowns while leading the team to an 11-5 record and a playoff berth. For a franchise that had won only 2 games a year before, that stands as one of the greatest single-season turnarounds in NFL history, and a rookie quarterback was the primary engine behind it. He made 3 straight Pro Bowls to start his career, proving he was exactly the player everyone thought he would be. This is where the story takes a turn for the worse, because the Colts never actually built a real offensive line to protect their investment. Luck was sacked 41 times during his rookie season, and that number never really improved as the years went on. Season after season, he was forced to absorb massive hits behind a line that couldn't block, while the front office tried to patch the holes with cheap free agents instead of a long-term solution. The physical toll started to pile up, and Luck actually played with a torn labrum for 2 full seasons without telling anyone just to stay on the field. After missing the entire 2017 season with a shoulder injury, he returned in 2018 to win Comeback Player of the Year and looked like his old dominant self again. Then, in a move that shocked the league, he retired at 29 years old during a preseason game while Colts fans famously booed him off the field. The Andrew Luck story isn't about a bust, but rather a generational talent that the Colts eventually broke. They got 7 seasons out of the best prospect in a decade, yet they never gave him an offensive line worth having until his body had already given out. Then you have RG3, the man Washington traded a massive haul of 3 first-round picks and a second-rounder to the Rams just to move up and select. His rookie season made that price look like a bargain as he put up 3,200 passing yards and 27 total touchdowns on his way to winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. He was the most electric dual-threat quarterback the league had seen in years, but everything changed during a playoff game against Seattle. RG3 hurt his knee earlier in the season but kept playing through it. He injured it so badly in the 4th quarter of that playoff game that he needed surgery to repair both his ACL and LCL, and he returned the following season as a shadow of the player he used to be. The explosiveness that made him a star was gone, and Washington went 3-10 in his starts during the 2013 season. He eventually bounced to Cleveland and then to Baltimore as a backup, finishing his career with only 42 total starts and just 1 Pro Bowl from his rookie year. That knee injury essentially ended his career before it truly could begin, which is a tragedy considering the draft capital Washington burned to get him. Ryan Tannehill was selected 8th overall by the Miami Dolphins, which was a massive investment in a franchise QB. His earlier years in Miami showed flashes of potential, but never the consistency you would expect from a top 10 pick. From 2012 to 2016, he posted decent numbers, crossing 4,000 yards in 2015, but the Dolphins never made a serious playoff run behind him. A torn ACL wiped out his entire 2017 season, and by 2018, it was clear Miami was moving on. Then he was traded to the Tennessee Titans in 2019, and Tannehill looked like a completely different QB. He led the NFL in passer rating, yards per attempt, and won Comeback Player of the Year. The Titans rewarded him with a massive extension, and for a moment it seemed like Miami had made a catastrophic mistake. But the comeback story had an expiration date on it. From 2021 onward, Ryan regressed steadily with more interceptions and fewer big plays. By 2023, he was benched mid-season and hasn't really played in any games since. Finally, we have Brandon Weeden at pick 22, a selection that remains one of the strangest decisions in draft history. The Browns drafted him when he was already 28 years old because he had spent years playing minor league baseball before returning to college football. This meant his rookie season started at an age when most quarterbacks were already entering their prime years, leaving him with almost no room for error. Cleveland went 5-15 in his starts, and he finished his time there with a career passer rating of only 76. He spent the rest of his career as a journeyman in Dallas and Houston, retiring without ever becoming a legitimate NFL starter. It was one of the worst first-round quarterback picks of the modern era, and the Browns made it knowing he had a shorter runway than anyone else in the class. When you look at these QBs, the picture is actually pretty grim. The best one retired broken at 29, the second one never recovered from a single playoff game, another had a flash-in-the-pan moment, and the last one was essentially 30 before he even took a snap. The QB situation in this class was a disaster, but the wide receivers in this class might be the saddest part of the story because they had legit top-tier talent. We saw 4 wide receivers go in the first round of the 2012 draft, and between all of them, they played a combined 234 games throughout their careers. That might sound like a decent number until you realize that linebacker Luke Kuechly, who went 9th overall, played 118 games all by himself. Justin Blackmon went 5th overall to the Jacksonville Jags after a legendary career at Oklahoma State, where he's essentially the best receiver prospect in the country, being Brandon Whedon's go-to guy. He was back-to-back All-American and Biletnikoff winner, who put up 100 yards in 4 of his last 6 games in college. The 2 that weren't 100-yard games were 99 and 95 yards respectively, so the Jags thought they were getting a foundational weapon. Justin looked like the real deal immediately, leading all rookies in catches and yards while finishing his first year with 865 yards and 5 TDs. The game showed a dominant player who could win on every single route at the NFL level. Everything changed in 2013 when the league handed him a 4-game suspension for a substance abuse violation, though he still averaged over 100 yards a game once he returned to the lineup. Then came another suspension, this time indefinitely, and the Jags front office eventually announced before his 3rd season that he likely wouldn't be returning to the team. After another suspension in 2015, he never stepped foot on an NFL field again, meaning Justin retired having played just 1.5 seasons of professional football. It's genuinely painful to watch his old highlights and think about what could have been, because he remains one of the most talented players to flame out this quickly in recent memory. Michael Floyd went 13th overall to Arizona and had a much longer career than Blackmon, but the end result was still a major disappointment for the Cardinals. He looked like a legit star in the making in 2013 while playing alongside Larry Fitz, cracking the 1,000-yard mark and serving as a highly functional number 2 option for 3 straight years. That momentum stopped cold following a DUI arrest in 2016, which ended his time in Arizona mid-season, and he simply never found his footing with any other team after that. He bounced around for a few short stints with minimal production before falling out of the league by 2019. And while he wasn't a total catastrophe, he never became the elite playmaker the Cardinals expected. Tennessee took Kendall Wright at pick 20 because he was the go-to guy for RG3 at Baylor, offering a quick and versatile skill set that allowed him to line up anywhere on the field. He actually caught 94 passes in 2013, which is a massive production number, but that individual success never really translated into wins or a clear identity as a true number 1 receiver. The Titans spent years cycling through different QBs and offensive coordinators, so Wright never had a stable environment he needed to actually develop his game. He eventually left for Chicago in 2017 with 1 underwhelming season, and by 2018 his time in the NFL was officially over. Then we have AJ Jenkins going 30th overall to San Francisco, and this is a selection that still doesn't make any sense when you look back at the details. He was healthy for the entire year on a 49ers team that actually went to the Super Bowl, yet Jenkins managed to catch 0 passes during the regular season. He was only targeted 1 time and spent a significant chunk of the year on the practice squad, which led San Francisco to cut him after just 12 months. That made him the only first-round pick in this entire class to be released after 1 season without an injury, and after a high-speed failure in Kansas City, he was out of the league for good. Teams clearly reached on receivers who put up massive college numbers in spread systems against bad defenses, and those specific skills didn't translate to the Sunday game. We're talking about 4 first-round picks who are all out of the league within 6 years of being drafted, which is a staggering failure rate. The best receiver from this entire class wasn't even a first rounder, as that honor goes to T.Y. Hilton, who Indianapolis actually stole in the 3rd round and picked 92. Now this isn't a wide receiver, but another failed skill player is Trent Richardson. Coming out of Alabama in 2012, Trent Richardson was being compared to Adrian Peterson, a can't-miss running back talent who had racked up over 3,000 yards and 35 TDs across 3 college seasons, helping Crimson Tide win 2 BCS national championships. The Cleveland Browns were so convinced that they traded 4 draft picks to move up and select him 3rd overall. His rookie season showed promise, 950 yards and 11 TDs, but a concerning 3.6 yards per carry average was an early red flag. After 2 subpar games to open 2013, Cleveland shipped him to Indianapolis for a first-round pick, essentially admitting the mistake early. The change of scenery changed nothing. In 2 seasons with the Colts, Richardson barely averaged 3 yards per carry and was released after 2014. The Oakland Raiders gave him a shot in 2015, but he didn't make the roster, and the Ravens signed him in 2016, and he spent the entire camp on the PUP list before being cut, becoming one of the most disappointing players of all time. The defensive backs in this class follow the same pattern as the wide receivers: high draft capital, but definitely not enough production. We saw teams spend premium picks on secondary help, but most of these careers never came close to matching the expectations of their draft slots. Dallas took Morris Claiborne at number 6 overall, and coming out of LSU, he was viewed as one of the most physically gifted cornerback prospects we had seen in years. He had the elite athleticism and the natural coverage instincts that usually justify a top 10 selection, which had the Cowboys front office and fans incredibly hyped. When you pick a corner at 6, you're expecting a shutdown defender who forces opposing offensive coordinators to completely change their game plan. But that version of Claiborne never showed up. Injuries ruined his momentum almost immediately, and he struggled to stay on the field, missing significant time in 3 of his first 4 seasons in Dallas. Even when he was healthy enough to play, his performance was wildly inconsistent. And while he wasn't necessarily a bad player, he wasn't the star the Cowboys needed him to be. He eventually moved on to the Jets for 2 decent but unspectacular years before finishing his career with a quiet season in Kansas City where he barely saw the field. Claiborne ended his career with only 7 interceptions in 85 games, which looks even worse when you compare him to Harrison Smith. Smith was taken 23 picks later in the same draft, but he went on to record 37 interceptions and 6 Pro Bowls while playing 192 games, all as a safety. Mark Barron went 7th overall to Tampa Bay, but his story is a bit different because the league didn't know how to use a safety with his specific build yet. The Buccaneers drafted him to be the centerpiece of their secondary, but the fit was clunky from the start and the production never justified such a high pick. Tampa Bay eventually gave up and traded him to St. Louis midway through his 3rd year. That's where his career took an interesting turn when the Rams moved him to linebacker. He actually turned out to be an okay linebacker, and in 2015 he recorded 16 TFLs while playing off the line of scrimmage. He put together 3 solid seasons in that hybrid role with the Rams and stayed productive during his time in Pittsburgh, eventually finishing his career with 119 games and 12 sacks. By most normal standards, that's a very respectable NFL career, but it still isn't what you want from the 7th overall pick. Tampa Bay desperately needed a cornerstone defensive back, and they ended up with a guy who was better suited for linebacker, and the team paid for that scouting error for a long time. Dre Kirkpatrick went 17th overall to Cincinnati, and his career is probably the most straightforward example of a fine player who just didn't live up to the hype. He stayed in the league for a long time and played 119 games, which is more than Claiborne and most of the other defensive backs in this specific class. He was a consistent starter for the Bengals for years and played all the way through 2021, but he never became the shutdown corner the team expected when they turned in his card. He was a capable starter and a solid coverage guy, but he was the type of player you usually find in the 2nd or 3rd round rather than the top 20. All 3 of these defensive backs entered the league as highly touted prospects, yet they all struggled with health, consistency, or finding that role that actually fit their talent. That's the common thread with the 1st round of 2012. We see a lot of what could have been scenarios here, where the physical traits were obvious but the actual impact on the field just never materialized. So far, this class looks like a total disaster, and if we're being honest, picks 1 through 20 mostly lived up to that reputation. But there are some 1st rounders that tell a completely different story. Luke Kuechly going 9th to Carolina is easily one of the best picks of this entire draft class, and it's not even a close conversation. He walked into the league and took Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2012, followed that up with Defensive Player of the Year in 2013, and eventually stacked up 7 Pro Bowl selections and 5 first-team All-Pro selections. The stats are wild because he led the NFL in tackles as a rookie and then repeated that feat 3 years later, meaning by the time he walked away, he had more combined tackles than anyone else in the league during his active years. Luke was just a different type of player with sideline-to-sideline range and elite pre-snap instincts that let him drop into coverage to erase tight ends. Carolina built their entire defensive identity around his leadership for 8 years, but the football world mourned when he retired in January 2020 at just 28 years old due to concussions. He was a first ballot Hall of Famer the moment he became eligible, and in a 1st round defined by disappointment, Kuechly was one of the guys who exceeded every single expectation. Downta Hightower going at 25 to New England represents a different kind of success story, since he never grabbed the individual trophies Kuechly did, but his impact on winning was massive. He walked away with 3 Super Bowl rings and established himself as one of the most important defensive pillars in the Patriots' history during that 2nd dynasty run. Most fans remember his legendary play in the Super Bowl when the Patriots were trailing in the 3rd quarter and Hightower came off the edge to strip sack Matt Ryan. New England recovered that fumble, and that was the exact moment the greatest comeback in sports history started to feel real for everyone watching. He served as the engine of that defense for nearly a decade because he was versatile enough to rush the passer, drop in coverage, or stone the run depending on what Bill Belichick needed that week. Late 1st round picks are supposed to provide high-level starting production and championship contributions, and that's exactly what Hightower delivered for the Patriots. Chandler Jones was taken at 21 by New England as well, and he used that opportunity to build one of the most productive pass rushing careers of his entire generation. He finished his time in the league with 112 career sacks and a Super Bowl ring, proving that his talent was both real and sustained over a long period. During the 2017 season in Arizona, he led the entire league with 17 sacks and then followed that up by topping 19 sacks the very next year. His career unfortunately ended in a painful spiral with the Raiders in 2023, following several concerning social media posts and multiple arrests that landed him on the non-football illness list. It's a complicated legacy to look back on because he was genuinely a great player who dealt with a very difficult ending. but the actual football resume he left behind is completely legit. The guards from this 2012 class deserve some respect here too, especially David DeCastro, who went 24th overall to Pittsburgh and became a 6-time Pro Bowler. He was widely considered one of the best interior linemen of his era and anchored the Steelers' offensive line during their most explosive years before ankle injuries forced him out the league at age 31. Kevin Zeitler went 27th overall to Cincinnati and quickly turned into one of the most consistent guards in football for over a decade, which is impressive considering he's still starting games well into his mid-30s now. And we finally have to talk about Stephon Gilmore going 10th overall to Buffalo. Because even though it took a few years for him to fully peak, he eventually became the 2019 Defensive Player of the Year in New England. He led the league in interceptions and pass breakups that season, putting together one of the most dominant cornerback performances we have seen in the past 10 years, completely shutting down the side of the football and getting a Super Bowl ceiling interception during the second dynasty run in 2018. You also have some of the big boys like Don Terry Poe, Michael Brockers, and Fletcher Cox, who are absolutely incredible for their time. They just probably won't make the NFL Hall of Fame, but definitely the Hall of Very Good. So what are we actually looking at when we add all these pieces together? The number 1 overall pick retired at age 29 with tears in his eyes, while his own home fans were booing him off the field. The number 2 overall pick had one magical season before blowing out his knee in the playoffs and never truly recovering his elite form. The number 3 overall pick managed a miserable 3.3 yards per carry for his career and got traded just 2 games into his second season for a first-round pick that was essentially wasted on another struggling back. The 5th overall pick only lasted 1.5 seasons before substance violations ended his career entirely, while the 6th pick bounced around 3 different teams and finished with only 7 career interceptions. Even the 22nd overall pick was already 28 years old on draft day and finished his career with a dismal 5-15 record as a starter. These are not just guys who became average backups, these were franchise-altering mistakes and what-if stories that changed the trajectory of multiple organizations. It's rare to see a draft where a team gives up 3 first-round picks for a player who only gives them 1 healthy season of elite production. The deeper issue here is what this class tells us about how teams were evaluating talent back in 2012. 4 wide receivers went in the first round and not a single one of them turned into a true number 1 target, with all 4 out of the league within 6 years. The best receiver from this entire class was T.Y. Hilton, like we mentioned before, and the best quarterback was obviously Russell Wilson at pick 75. Even the legendary linebacker group from this year, which includes Bobby Wagner, Demario Davis, and Levante David, all were second or mid-round picks. That's the real legacy of the 2012 draft class, and it's not that the talent was missing from this pool. The talent was clearly there, but the scouting departments missed badly on the specific positions that cost most of them the draft and their jobs. The thing is, almost none of the massive potential from this draft class at the top actually turned into production on the field, which ultimately led to the downfall of this class. So there you have it. Watch the next video here if you haven't seen it, and subscribe if you're new.